That's going. Good. Hopefully see a green light here soon. And it is perfect. Okay, we are live, and it should be fixed now. Welcome back to Free Beer Society, your one-stop shop for all things open source technology and tech policy. We're back after a couple weeks off for illness and tech issues after we found out that YouTube was not actually publishing our videos after the live stream. So this should be back on your podcast feeds, and we apologize for a couple weeks now becoming lost episodes.
So this is our first officially recorded episode.
No, we still have a backlog available, but the last 2 weeks, for whatever reason, YouTube was not pushing them through to the podcast feed.
Oh, of course. Why wouldn't?
Yeah.
Silly me. YouTube.
Yeah, so now we're back, and everything should be going as swimmingly as possible.
Now, before you were going into this one, this must be against the First Amendment, ain't it?
You would think that. However, that would assume that the rule of law still applies in America.
Alright, I'm an idiot.
So, of course, this is Free Beer Society, a podcast named after the concept of open source information, sharing information and data freely, contributing towards a global common good. In America, no such thing exists. Our first story tonight, as it's currently top of mind on a lot of Americans' minds, after learning that Colbert was taken off the air for political reasons because he was the best viewed show on all of Paramount.
Yeah, it claims financial reasons, but the best viewed show.
Yeah.
Best viewed show. Look, you have to show me the numbers for how this man is spending so much more money for his late night talk show compared to all other late night talk shows.
Right, and this is after CBS parent company Paramount paid South Park $1.5 billion for their newest season.
And then
with a 5-year deal. And so clearly they had the money. And South Park, of course, also went right away into tearing apart Trump and Paramount for censoring Colbert.
No, let's say it properly. South Park did what they did best, their job.
Yes. Yeah.
As they have done for 20 years, 20 plus years, 28 years. They're on season 26, but they first aired in 97, so yeah, pretty much 28 years. Yeah, and we do not have an episode tonight, sadly.
No, I still need to watch the first episode of the season.
Oh, it's so good.
I've seen clips of it online. I'm like, oh, I need to.
We gotta get into this, but I want to say this about the episode for a sec. There were guests with me that week, right?
Yeah.
And we all watched it, and it's like a variety of ages, right?
Right.
And also people who never really watched South Park or not watched it in 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
And we all loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah. I heard speculation that one reason they may not have had an episode this week is they want to now double down on the season.
Yeah, more power to them.
They got exactly what they wanted in every sense. Even with the Paramount deal, they got the banned episodes Paramount put on a list off the ban list.
Yeah.
Besides some exceptions, there's a few ones that always stay sadly on a banned list. I don't agree with that idea, but they're pretty. There's some reasoning behind it, and I'm not going to see why on there.
Sure.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay. So our first story tonight is our most timely because some of these stories are holdovers from last week as well as earlier in the week, as we were doing this on a Wednesday as opposed to Monday. So we have from Ashley Bellinger at Ars Technica. Skydance deal allows Trump's FCC to censor speech and silence dissent on CBS. The Federal Communications Commission has approved Skydance's $8 billion acquisition of Paramount, which owns CBS. But the agency's approval drew fiery dissent from the only Democratic commissioner, Ana Gomez, after requiring written commitments from Skydance that allow the government to influence editorial decisions at CBS. Gomez accused the FCC of imposing never-before-seen controls over newsroom decisions and editorial judgment in direct violation of the First Amendment and the law. I got a lot of mucus, so I'm kind of stumbling over my own words here. I apologize.
I think we're both a bit sick. It's all right.
Under the agreement, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr explained that Skydance has given assurances that all of the new company's programming will embody a diversity of viewpoints from across the political and ideological spectrum. Carr claimed that the requirements were necessary to restore America's trust in mainstream media, backing conservative claims that media is biased against Trump, and appointing an ombudsman for 2 years to ensure that CBS's reporting will be fair, unbiased, and fact-based. Any complaints of bias that the ombudsman receives will be reviewed by the president of New Paramount, the FCC confirmed. But Gomez said Americans will pay the price of Skydance's cowardly capitulation to the Trump administration. She accused the FCC of using its vast power to pressure Paramount to broker a private legal settlement with Trump and further erode press freedom, claiming that requirements represent the Trump administration's coordinated campaign to censor speech, control narratives, and silence dissent. And of course, the story is happening hot off the heels of CBS canceling Colbert after his current season, which will run until next year. And the Colbert Show, I almost said the Colbert Report, but Colbert's Late Show is polling at #1 in terms of late night talk shows, and besides things like South Park, is the most viewed show on the CBS roster currently. So,
yeah.
One, it's very clearly, as much as I say, like it looks like it's very clearly like politically charged. Censoring of Colbert is why he got censored, and as a business decision, that might be CBS shooting themselves in the foot. But they are now more or less becoming a state-run media by having an actual government office overseeing what's supposed to be private and unbiased news.
Well, I think we are starting to see, right? All what would happen with 60 Minutes. Like you could see that once people, like there's a line being made right now. You could see who stands up for the First Amendment, and who stands up for their beliefs, and who gets in line.
Yeah. And that does set a dangerous precedent as well for what other forms of communication or entertainment or any sort of, any sort of flow of information where it is in a position where the government can essentially use business to control it, use the levers of capitalism to pressure the system. What that's going to do in terms of creating other forms of censored or state-backed media when that used to be something that in like the West, like we would always talk about, like Russian state media or like North Korean state media, Chinese state media. The idea of these that their news sources require government oversight in order to actually like produce news, and so because of that, you're getting propaganda. The facts aren't present. And this is what's going to be happening to CBS now. And this now sets a precedent that the government is willing to kind of abandon the rule of law, as we talked about, and could potentially do this to other networks or other information sources.
Yep.
But I have been enjoying now that Colbert is kind of free to go off the rails.
Oh, he is old enough about anymore. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. So if you haven't already been watching The Late Show with Colbert, I definitely recommend it. He also had Patton Oswalt on recently, and that was a really good episode as well. Our next story, kind of, there's going to be a theme here, and just talking about a lot about government offices and their relationship to, or government offices that have relationship to tech, or kind of the same offices we've been talking about for most of this administration.
Well, it makes sense. A lot of that is fitting right now, unfortunately. I don't like that be the case at all, but me liking it and it fitting are two separate topics.
Yeah.
And it is accurate to what is going on right now. Yeah.
And right. This is kind of yeah. A lot of tonight's stories are also going to be from Ars Technica. It's happened that they had what I thought were the best articles on some of the stuff that's happening. So this is from John Brodkin at Ars Technica. Court rules Trump broke U.S. law when he fired a Democratic FTC commissioner. A federal judge ruled yesterday that President Trump violated U.S. law when he fired a Democrat, Rebecca Kelly Slaughter. But also, that's a comic book name.
Yeah.
From her position at the Federal Trade Commission.
Yeah, it is.
Based on the law of removal of FTC commissioners is clear, and the reasons explained below, the court will grant Ms. Slaughter's motion for summary judgment and deny defendant's cross motion for summary judgment. The memorandum opinion from Judge Lauren Ali Khan in a U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Trump is appealing the ruling to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, and yesterday asked the District Court to stay its order while the appeal is pending. The case could end up at the Supreme Court, with the Trump administration seeking to overturn a 1935 precedent that Ali Khan cited while ruling in Slaughter's favor. This court has no illusions about where this case's journey leads, Ali Khan wrote, but for the time being, defendants attempted to remove Ms. Slaughter from position as an FTC commissioner did not comply with the FTC Act's removal protections. Because the protections remain constitutional, as they have for almost a century, Ms. Slaughter's purported removal was unlawful and without legal effect. Ali Khan noted that the district court may not enjoin the president directly, but said she would issue a declaratory judgment that the president's purported removal of Ms. Slaughter was invalid and that she is rightful commissioner of the FTC. An accompanying order said that FTC Chairman Andrew Ferguson and other agency officials may not interfere with Ms. Slaughter's right to perform her lawful duties as an FTC commissioner until the expiration of her term, or unless she is lawfully removed by the president for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Slaughter posted that she's headed back into the office on Friday morning. This is, following several things, but Slaughter was one of the commissioners that sued Trump after being removed from office. And of course, the FTC is the agency that oversees trading securities, as well as several other matters of business in the states. Which, of course, when your entire presidential position is manipulating the securities market and big business to make more money for yourself and your friends, you can be an issue if you have members of the opposition party in the governing body.
Possibly.
So,
small chance.
Small chance, yeah. So of course, Trump wanted to remove Slaughter and another commissioner there. so that he could continue to grift the American populace and create an oligarchic autocracy with himself at the top. And kind of maybe a little bit of a stretch to get to how our focus on our show relates to this, but we're here to celebrate technology and things being open source, the flow of information, the democratic use of tech, which are products of commerce. And this is kind of everything that flies in the face of that, of limiting control of business, of trading securities, which investment is really the only way to make money in America nowadays. And could set a precedent as well for how businesses are aligned, which would then influence the flow of information, the flow of software and technology. Without FTC regulation, you may end up getting, a monopoly on software packages, software services, and then all of those will have a backdoor built into it that allows, government oversight, government overreach. So if you were to use it to post anything that was critical of Trump, you may end up face legal repercussions, as we have seen. He is not afraid to use whatever powers he can to attack his detractors, or even if they're not necessarily people of influence. You can get stopped from entering the country legally if you have a meme that he doesn't like on your phone.
Truly, the fact that we can have this conversation is just it's astonishing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These are not sentences we should be saying.
Yeah. I'm sure anyone who potentially has followed previous ventures and previous joint ventures we've done, Keys to the Geekdom, knows that we're big comic book fans, and it feels like we're living in the Lex Luthor America, or a Doom America.
Well, Luther, it's Lex Luthor America. I don't like that.
Yeah. At least with
Luther's smarter.
Right. And at least with the Doom America, we'd get education and healthcare.
Yeah. Oh.
We got all the fascism, but none of the.
You see the Victor Von Doom?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want that healthcare.
That's fair.
I want to support Doombots.
I mean, what is ICE if not just the modern American Doombot?
That is definitely a statement. That's a point, I guess. Yeah. I still don't want Doombot. But and for let's comparison, that feels more like a comparison, parameter comparison. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Next.
All right. From John Barkin at Ars Technica again.
More FCC.
This is a different F office, but yes, also related. This is the one that's the first FCC from the story. So FTC in the middle, but yeah. FCC to eliminate gigabyte speed goal and scrap analysis of broadband prices. The Federal Communications Commission is ditching the Biden-era standards for measuring progress toward the goal of universal broadband deployment. The changes will make it easier for the FCC to give the broadband industry a passing grade in an annual progress report. FCC Chairman Brendan Carr's proposal would give the industry a thumbs up even if it falls short of 100% deployment, eliminate a long-term goal of gigabyte broadband speeds, and abandon a new effort to track the affordability of broadband. Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act requires the FCC to determine whether broadband is being deployed on a reasonable and timely basis to all Americans. If the answer is no, the U.S. law says the FCC must take immediate action to accelerate deployment on such capability by removing barriers to infrastructure investment and by promoting competition in the telecommunications market. Generally, Democratic-led commissions have found that the industry isn't doing enough to make broadband universally available, while Republican-led commissions have found the opposite. Democratic-led commissions have also periodically increased the speeds used to determine whether advanced telecommunication capabilities are widely available, while Republican-led commissions have kept the speed standards the same. So to kind of, I guess, break this down into everybody speech, broadband internet is currently the I want to say it's even the best standard, because that'd be something like fiber, but it's I would say a reasonable standard. It's somewhere like low end to middle of the pack, because we have much better internet available now. Like I have fiber optic where I live. But a lot of places in the US still do not have access to basic broadband internet. They might rely on satellite internet if they can get it, or they just don't have access to the web at all and have to do things old-fashioned way or drive into another area that has access to internet. And as we said a lot of times on the show, the internet is almost so ingrained in the daily operating of people's lives that it is a necessity at this point. You need it to pay bills, to be in communication with legal offices, things like that. And there was a standard put in place that said we have to get these remote regions access to decent internet so they can participate in society as it is, be able to pay their bills, be in communication, receive medical care via telehealth, things like that. And the current administration and the yes men they've put into the FCC have been working to put a stop to that, because part of those incentives that the FCC would be able to use to push for better broadband deployment, is promote competition, which means breaking up monopolies and promoting smaller businesses that would be able to get broadband out to those areas. And we talked about in our last story, this administration is all about monopolies, and so we're already kind of seeing this interaction here of what happens when this control over business intersects with technology and how that can hamper free and open communication. And in a sense, it is censoring because it's preventing people from having access to digital information, digital communication methods, but it's also preventing them just from interacting with basic elements of life at this point. I mean, I feel like everyone's health insurance at a minimum provides telehealth, and so for a lot of people who perhaps it'd be unfeasible for them to drive into town to see a doctor, either just because of distance or they're elderly and disabled or what have you, would be reliant on telehealth, they will not be able to have access to that because it is not in the financial best interest of larger telecommunications companies to make that investment.
Yeah, it's. And then I think it's more like this, right? Maybe this is the current analogy, okay? I think decent, reasonable internet, and at this point, essential as at a stupidism expectation of, I buy a banana at the grocery store. I expect that banana is healthy for me to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to pay for food. Yes, you have to pay for internet. I'm not saying make it fully like, okay, to give it to everyone for free. But when I go to get food, right, at a retailer, I expect the food is not corrupt, damaged. It'll poison me. It will hurt me. It will prevent me from doing my normal tasks.
Hmm.
You know, because we have regulations for our food that has to be a certain way before it can be given to the public. Relatively, at least.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of crazy chemicals in our food. You compare like North American food and Europe food, and we have so much bad stuff in our food. But so as maybe this analogy is not the best
So,
way to phrase it,
and we haven't even really like on
but
the show covered RFK Jr. and the FDA because that's not really our
yeah,
wheelhouse. But
yeah,
pretty soon those bananas are going to have smallpox and brainworms in them.
but normally you have the expectation that I buy this from grocery store. It is safe for me to eat.
Yeah.
It's of a certain standard. Is what I'm saying. And I think that this kind of the internet is so ingrained in our everyday now that it has to follow the same logic of it has a sort of standard that to be able to do what you're talking about.
Hmm.
I'm able to do a call with the doc. I'm able to do my bills and my taxes and whatever else that is mandatory in our society now to function in it. You know,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And yeah. And also being tech people, nerd people. I mean, you're in a different country. I'm in a place that is thankfully very tech literate and tech forward. So, um, this isn't anything impact us right away, but there could be dominoes down the line from this of you know how this emboldens or uh, intersects with Comcast, Verizon, Charter, and ends up files ends up leading to increased prices, more egregious monopolies than we already have, because internet providers are already um, operating in a duopoly, but they have their own trust. And again, antitrust legislation is something that I will harp on because it's something I think we need to revisit. But you'll have companies that operate in a trust with each other. It means like these will be our minimum prices. We won't drop below what our competitor is, because we want to be able to, and we're not really going to differentiate. It's mostly just going to be branding that separates us, because they don't want to go below a certain profit margin. Whereas in the sense of a true competition, without these trusts in place, perhaps they try to undercut each other or offer better services than the competitor. But that's not been the case for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
Okay. Another story here from Ashley Bellinger, Ars Technica, and this is the last one from Ars Technica for the day. It's frightening. Oh, where was that?
We have 3 more after counting this one.
Yeah. It's frighteningly likely many U.S. courts will overlook AI errors, experts say. This is following up to, if you cut our live shows, you would be following it, but because YouTube did not feel like pushing us to podcast feeds, you did not get the previous 2 stories on this development. But now, I guess to recap, police departments are using AI to generate police reports, to do summaries, to to tag evidence, and those AIs are producing a lot of very material errors, like errors that could affect a court or a jury's decision because it is actively misconstruing information or hallucinating information or falsifying reports in essence. And officers aren't really fact checking it; they're just pressing send and pushing it forward. But this is the most recent story in that development. Feeling nightmares that AI may soon decide legal battles, a Georgia Court of Appeals Judge Jeff Watkins explained why a 3-judge panel vacated an order last month that appears to be the first known ruling in which a judge sided with someone seemingly relying on fake AI generated case citations to win a legal fight. Now, experts are warning that judges overlooking AI hallucinations in court filings could easily become commonplace, especially in the typically overwhelmed lower courts. So far, only 2 states have moved to force judges to sharpen their tech competencies and adopt so they can spot AI red flags and theoretically stop disruptions to the justice system at all levels. The recently vacated order came in a Georgia divorce dispute where Watkins explained that the order itself was drafted by the husband's lawyer, Diana Lynch. That's a common practice in many courts where overburdened judges historically rely on lawyers to draft orders, but that protocol today faces heightened scrutiny as lawyers and non-lawyers increasingly rely on AI to compose and research legal filings, and judges risk rubber stamping fake opinions by not carefully scrutinizing AI-generated citations. The errant order partly relied on 2 fictitious cases to deny the wife's petition, which Watkins suggested were possibly hallucinations made up by a generative artificial intelligence, as well as 2 cases that had nothing to do with the wife's petition. Lynch was hit with $2,500 in sanctions after the wife appealed, and the husband's response, which also appeared to be prepared by Lynch, cited 11 additional cases that were either hallucinated or irrelevant. Watkins was further peeved that Lynch supported a request for attorney's fees for appealing by citing one of the new hallucinated cases, writing it added insult to injury. Worryingly, the judge could not confirm whether the fake cases were generated by AI or even determine if Lynch inserted the bogus cases into the court filings, indicating how hard it can be for courts to hold lawyers accountable for suspected AI hallucinations. Lynch did not respond to R's request for comment, and her website appeared to be taken down following media attention to the case. But Watkins noted that the irregularities in these filings suggest that they are drafted using generative AI, warning that many harms flow from the submission of fake opinions. Exposing deceptions can waste time and money, and AI misuse can deprive people of raising their best arguments. Fake orders can also swallow judges' and courts' reputations and promote cynicism of the justice system. If left unchecked, Watkins warned that these harms could pave the way to a future where a litigant may be tempted to defy a judicial ruling by disingenuously claiming doubt about its authenticity. Yeah. So, we were talking about how it's the possibility of this happening with it creating fake police reports, but now it's already been a harm and affected the legal system. In this case, at least it was just like a divorce filing. It wasn't, grand murder. But
Yeah.
it's still a point where we had a court decision based off 2 fake cases that could not set precedent, and then the response cited 11 more fake cases because AI does not actually fact check itself when you're telling it to draft something.
Oh my god. Yeah.
I mean, we're already in a point where the justice system faces so much criticism and doubt, rightfully so, because of racial or implicit bias that has created systemic issues in the system, and now that is continuing by essentially courts ruling in favor of computers making up fake information.
So why do you think they do not want to fight this?
I mean,
It's
yeah.
size laziness.
I think it has to be laziness. And in some places also just perhaps not. I mean, there's a lot of places that are still very much pro generative AI, despite the fact that it is more or less. I mean, okay, so I guess the equivalent would be like in school, right? When you're going through a program, and when you're creating papers or arguments, you're always told to cite your sources. You can't use Wikipedia. You can use Wikipedia as a starting off point, but you have to
Yeah,
cite hard sources that have been published and peer reviewed.
I remember that at school.
Yeah,
That's always a requirement.
yeah.
Logically so.
And so AI is meant to be one step removed from Wikipedia, where you do an AI query, which gives you a stepping off point to then you can then find peer reviewed sources that perhaps it references or that support it. Um, it's supposed to be a little bit easier because you use natural language to do so. However, there's people that are in business that are taking AI as gospel, despite the fact that it is incredibly flawed. Um, as we've learned, it does for coding, where it creates code that has security errors. It will just cite fake information. The only time I actually had an AI give me proper citations was when I was asking it questions about creating a battle royale with comic book characters, where it would reference like the actual like fandom pages.
Uh,
um, but so it does great with like web scrolling. But when you're looking to review like legal libraries, an AI does not have access to those, so it can't reference them. Um, Same thing like financial like journals because AI does not have access to go behind paywalls. Um,
yep.
so I think some people are just so deep, so high on the Kool Aid that they want to push this forward as much as possible because for businesses, it means they can cut costs by firing employees and have AI take their jobs.
Yeah.
Uh, and in America, capitalism rules everything. So a lot of judges are afraid to go at odds with big business essentially and say that no, we can't use AI because then that puts a tamper on AI, and by making it inadmissible in court, that now, which it should be, um, that now essentially makes it as publicly demeaned as it is already online. Where online there's a big fraction of people that if a business is using AI, they're saying, "Oh, that's a shitty business. We won't support them." And if that opinion gets backed by the courts, now there is for the president, for the mainstream to essentially abandon all interest in business using AI. So I think it's a bit of laziness, a bit of wishful thinking, and just a wish of that's like just people not necessarily wanting to go at war with. This seems to be the current zeitgeist of capitalism, so not necessarily wanting to go at war with that because they're bought into the fantasy of capitalism, essentially.
Fair enough.
I don't know if that made any sense or if I was just rambling, but I think I
I,
did.
I followed it.
Okay.
Then.
Yeah. I think AI, like, it has its place in terms of making shitty memes or doing weird, like, points, like, in terms of just summarizing knowledge in natural language or querying with natural language and then being jumping off point to those peer reviewed resources. But we're also in an area that is very anti science, so people don't necessarily want to admit or want to willingly engage with peer reviewed journal, peer reviewed sources.
Fair.
Yeah. Because like I feel like there is a big overlap between AI fanatics and anti-vaxxers.
Fair. It's an analysis.
Yeah. I guess I don't know if there's been anything like this happen in Canada already, or if this is even
I
something
don't
that's
think.
yeah.
Not that I've heard.
Because I feel like it's
But,
only in
no.
America that we have this massive hard on for AI. Because I haven't heard any like international stories about this kind of thing.
Yeah, but that kind of does sound like America.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so this is from Surav Rudra at FOSS News. Um, is Europe losing control of its data to Chinese apps? A case filed against TikTok, WeChat, and AliExpress. Um, so this is interesting because like I definitely feel like the case filed against TikTok in the U.S. is partially fear mongering. However, the way that this is laid out, I think, is a bit more nuanced. So
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see your opinion on this as well.
And actually, maybe it's making me think of a story I heard earlier today that I should have sent to you
Okay. Well,
about yeah, about Australia.
okay. We can always send it to me. You can cover it next week.
Yeah, totally. I will. I will after we're done. Anyway, continue.
Sure. We have grown used to big tech companies harvesting personal data and treating users as commodities to be bought and sold. Despite regulatory crackdowns and rising awareness among the general populace, the upper hand still remains with those greedy companies. Laws like the General Data Protection Regulation (GDPR) in the European Union were designed to restore a sense of control to users by mandating transparency, access, and accountability, but enforcement is slow and non-compliance is the norm. This past week, three popular Chinese platforms, TikTok, AliExpress, and WeChat, were accused of serious GDPR violations. The complaints come from Nob, NOYB, a Vienna-based company that focuses on fighting privacy violations and enforcing data protection laws in Europe. Nob has formally filed three complaints with the data protection authorities, DPAs, of Belgium, Greece, and the Netherlands, with each complaint targeting one of these three above-mentioned Chinese apps. TikTok is the subject of a complaint in Greece, AliExpress in Belgium, and WeChat in the Netherlands. All three are accused of failing to respond properly to user requests for access to their personal data, a right guaranteed under the GDPR. The unnamed users who have requested access to their personal data from these companies encountered textbook stonewalling tactics. TikTok provided incomplete and confusing information. AliExpress sent corrupted files that cannot be opened once. It could be opened only once. And WeChat ignored the request altogether. Clinty Sardilla, data protection lawyer at Noib, stated, "The GDPR makes it clear that companies must give their users specific information about the data they're processing about them. Just because they receive a lot of requests doesn't mean they can withhold information." The trio were accused of violating Articles 12 and 15 of the GDPR. Article 12 requires companies to respond to data access requests in a transparent, easily accessible, and timely manner. Article 15 gives users the right to obtain a copy of their personal data and detailed information about its processing. Noib's complaint states that TikTok, AliExpress, and WeChat failed to meet these obligations by providing incomplete, unreadable, or no data at all. The group has requested the DPAs issue a decision on this and also suggested imposing administrative fines to discourage some violations in the future. So what I thought this was kind of interesting was in the US we had privacy concern with TikTok. However, it was fully like just xenophobic fear mongering about the Chinese government, despite the fact that there's no evidence the Chinese government holds any sort of vested interest in TikTok's data. This is purely about these companies processing personal data, reselling it, and putting it in unsecure locations where it could be accessed by bad actors, or easily accessed by marketing firms that also are terrible at data privacy, that also expose your information to bad actors, as witnessed by the hundred some odd data leaks we get every year from these marketing companies.
Right.
And the idea that your information, that you should know where your information is and how it's being used, being a personal right, makes a lot of sense to me. And the idea that you should know who knows all of your stuff. And
Yeah.
so this I feel like is a more nuanced and it has and is a case that has more legs on it, because it is about how these companies are handling information and if it's being handled securely or not.
Yep. I agree with that.
How do you think that this compares against sort of the Chinese app fear mongering that happened a couple years ago?
Oh, that's that was also a couple of years ago, so my mind's a little fuzzy on that back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that mostly by the US though?
Yeah, I think it was the tail end of the previous Trump administration.
Yeah. It's like that was, and this is directed by the EU, right?
Yes.
I put more weight in this because this is the EU.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, if it's I agree with you know where the stuff's going. If it's an actual problem, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I trusted more from the EU than I do from the previous Trump administration
Yeah.
for I think obvious reasons. Even back then, it was kind of okay. You're, every line has to get the truth. So you know what? Most likely what you said is partly true, but it's also partly for fear mongering.
Yeah.
Now, I could be easily wrong, but I don't know the EU that well. Maybe this is very side motivated for fear mongering, but I don't feel that. You know,
Yeah.
this feels more. The first one that came to my mind was factual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been curious to see how it evolves, but and NOYP is that who are they again?
They're a um,
Hmm.
they're kind of like a uh, the non-government watchdog, where they're a NGO that uh, monitors digital applications
Right.
for privacy and information.
Yeah, like that. Give it to that. I trust that more.
Yeah.
So I take this more seriously based on the source
I agree
compared to
with that.
before.
Yeah. I think also there's more of like a history of precedence here because I feel like every major privacy and tech consumer regulation I feel like has come from the EU. The US has done some, sure, but the US being the home of the Patriot Act is very much in the idea that you as an individual have no rights to personal privacy. Whereas I
Yeah.
feel like laws and regulations limiting and regulating loot boxes came from Europe. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of our previous privacy information laws came from Europe, and then it has affected the US because the companies have to abide by them. And so they've also made their software operate that same way in the US. But those cases get started in the EU.
I agree. Um, yep, I agree with all that. And I think also as the years go on, we see more data breaches, we see more stuff to delete. Sometimes for good, kind of ish. And of course, as far as criminals,
Yeah.
sometimes for often very time for bad and private information and private photos, and etc. etc.
Yeah.
So uh, obviously there's problems. Obviously these are not tight enough. You know, um, yeah.
Yeah.
And North America is not doing enough to combat this. It feels like so. If Europe wants to take charge on this, go ahead.
Yeah. I agree with that. Okay. And our last story for the night from Surav at FOSS News again. Made Linux great again. Linux desktop usage hits record highs in the US.
Not surprised by that.
Yeah. For years, the notion of the a year of the Linux desktop YOLD, as a shorthand maybe, has been hopeful expression of Linux enthusiasts around the world. Every time Linux, or more specifically Linux Desktop, makes a notable leap, calls for YOLD start echoing across the internet. But then again, many agree that the year of Linux is less about a specific year, but more about when you, the person using the distro, feel it. It's the moment when your Linux setup finally clicks for everyday use and you don't want to go back to your other operating system anymore. As it turns out, many people are getting their own version of the year of Linux desktop in the US because something pretty interesting happened. Linux has crossed the 5% mark in the US desktop market for the first time ever, according to the StatCounter's global stats for June 2025. Linux now holds 5.04% of the desktop market, surpassing the unknown category, which accounts for 4.76. This decline was expected, partly due to upcoming Windows 10 end of life, which leaves many users without older hardware stuck choosing between upgrading to Windows 11, which isn't friendly to older machines, or searching for alternatives. On top of that, Microsoft's recent aggressive push toward AI-enabled features like Copilot has sparked mixed reactions, with many feeling that the changes worsen privacy concerns. If you ask me, I'm glad to see this. More people should switch to Linux because various distributions have become increasingly incredibly accessible. For anyone who doesn't need specialized software and just wants a reliable system for everyday use in gaming, a Linux distro is definitely the way to go. If you want to stay on top of how Linux desktop is going, they have a market share update. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I feel like this is part of our ongoing topic of the idea of digital emancipation, or yeah, I guess they call it digital emancipation, from breaking it free out of like the kind of the two party system that is Windows and Mac, as well as going to a place where the system does exactly what you need. It doesn't store your personal information unless you absolutely find a way to do so. And like you can register your Linux system using a fake name and email if you want to. But it is not also party to government-based spyware like Mac and Windows have been found to. So I think it's kind of interesting to see this jump. I think definitely PewDiePie's video on Linux played a part in this. Since people now realize that you can game in Linux, and a lot of people just use their PC for gaming and don't actually do a whole lot of like hard computing. Yeah. So using something like Mint or Bazite is totally viable for the average consumer now. I use Mint and I do all my gaming on Steam. I can play Final Fantasy 14 on it. Everything works no problem. Although I might switch to Bazite because I've been seeing a few things on that. Looks interesting. But the main thing that got me was the idea that I did exactly what I wanted it to. It wasn't doing weird stuff with like feeding me ads, targeted ads in my operating system. Like in the Windows 11 search bar, it'll give you ads.
Yeah.
And those are targeted ads, which means that it's collecting your personal information and selling that to marketers. And because that is built into the marketing, to the operating system, there's no way to really opt out of that. And as we've just discussed, that means the information is now being held by marketing firms in low security settings in places where it is at risk of being exposed or held or manipulated by bad actors, putting you at risk of identity theft and things like that. So jumping over to an operating system that does not do that, partly of it was peace of mind, partly performance, and then also just the ability to be fully ingrained in a open source system where I'm not held by predatory licenses for software or for tools that I use. And I have not touched Windows except to play Mecha Break for the past 2 months.
That reminds me of a new mech game I would recommend you after the show.
Ooh.
It didn't make me think a lot. It comes out literally like 24, like 6 hours it comes out. Anyway, yeah. I'm getting more and more tempted to like get a Linux rig at some point. But I tend to push for it. And I really don't have much to say on this because we've talked about this to death already a bit.
Yeah.
You know, the beginning Python is interesting, and I did about the video and that. I can agree it's pushing more people towards it then, but it was, it's gonna have competition, and
Yeah.
it clearly, I remember 10 years ago when I had a friend of mine that was a diehard Linux guy, right? We're not really touching much anymore. We kind of are, we kind of not. Anyway, I remember back then, I'm like, you can't have it on Linux. You can't do a thing with on Linux. You're going to be super limited. I agree. Now that's not the case,
Yeah.
you know. But that was literally 10 years ago.
Hmm.
A lot can change in 10 years, as
Yeah.
we all know.
Yeah. Now we have things like Steam's Proton, which Steam is a compatibility layer that works on just about anything except for games that have a kernel level anti cheat. Um,
Yep.
but then for other things that do, or if it just whoever isn't interacting with your Linux drivers for your NVIDIA card or what have you have things like NVIDIA GeForce Now, where you can pay $10 a month or $7 for 15 hours or whatever, and stream it to your system uh, from your Steam library, and that also ends up working out in an interesting way because if you're what I bought is I bought the 6-month pass because I got it for half off, so I did that. And then looking at my energy consumption as I'm streaming the game and as opposed to actually running it, I'm actually using a lot less power, which is also saving me money on my energy.
Yes.
So even though like I still prefer to run games naturally on my hardware, if for whatever reason there's something I need to do that, or if I'm just feeling lazy and don't want to update a game or download it, or if it's something that works off Epic Store, because you can use Epic Store. There's the Heroic Game Launcher that uses Epic Store. I just have my Epic Store linked through my GeForce, and I do stuff through
Fair.
that. And so I play Marvel Midnight Suns through that, and my GPU and CPU usage stay
Wait,
below 10%.
why do you play Marvel Midnight Suns?
I just picked it up because it was free through Prime Gaming on Epic.
I'm curious. It's also later.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah. But I used it everything I do that's 100% on this. It's interesting.
yeah,
Not surprising to me at this point.
yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see also how, because the last episodes we talked about it, but again, those episodes are now lost to the void.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of having a jump to Linux like this is because the open source mentality, right? If you're participating in the open source ecosystem, in some way you're expected to give back, whether that is writing your own code or your own stack and putting it up in GitHub for people to then use and add on themselves. So you're helping better and develop the packages you're using, or even just taking software surveys, taking hardware surveys, giving information back, submitting reports, engaging in the back and forth with the development team to help them be more targeted in the way they're spending time. Because a lot of these guys, this may not be an actual job for them. This may just be a hobby. You can help them feel like they're contributing, like they're being more productive with what they're doing by giving them information on how to be more targeted. For people where this is their job, like Red Hat, you're helping them be more productive, be more efficient, and develop a better product because you're giving them the information they need to develop development paths. And so this is why it's beneficial to have so many governments now in Europe jumping over to Linux-based systems because they're getting just a huge swath of information now to help develop. But also, when a substantial amount of user bases in America now are on Linux, now these teams are getting a huge chunk of information. And again, this is talked about before about protecting information, personal privacy, blah, blah. This is probably going to be fully anonymous information, just saying this is an operating system with this CPU, this GPU doing this or encountered this error. And so now that development team knows that, okay, this is an error we need to account for and correct without attaching a name or any personal information to it at all. But it's still getting that information in the right hands to now the next release is going to fix that problem, and it's going to be fix that problem for everyone. So even though you're not created a stack, you sending that the survey in has helped make the open source ecosystem better.
Fair. Well, that is it. I have anything else to say.
Yeah. Well, do you have any closing thoughts on any of our stories from today?
I want to say something about the administration, but we all know what's going on. So, it, as it gets worse, it feels more hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
But the EU thinners happen to see. Because we need regulation, we need laws for this type of stuff. And I think they're doing a good job. I think, even like, an example, you said, like, they handled the loot box issue, right? They're the ones that doesn't push that.
Mm-hmm.
And no type of laws are going to come from the EU and protecting data and et cetera. It'll come from the EU, it will not come from North America.
Yeah.
But because those companies want to operate in the EU because it's a massive part of the world, not the biggest, but not a small portion at all either. They will change to operate there, and that will bleed into many other markets.
Yeah.
And bleed into North America as well, which is a benefit to us. I think that's the big thing I have to say really on this. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me, and of course, thank you for watching and listening. If you're listening on podcast services, make sure to review, share, do all that good stuff. Now that we have hopefully fixed the issue and should be updating your podcast feed about a couple minutes after we end recording tonight. We will try to be back next Monday. I believe we are both free to do so.
Yeah, I have nothing Monday. Like I should end. So
we should be back at normal time and hopefully have our stuff still fixed.
Firmly,
yeah. I guess until that time, stay safe out there, and do you know who has your information?
Have a wonderful night, all. See you next week.